प्यारे बच्चों, आपका +1 क्लास में स्वागत है। आपके केमिस्ट्री सब्जेक्ट में जो 14th यूनिट है एनवायरमेंटल केमिस्ट्री, उसमें जो आज हम टॉपिक्स डिस्कस करने जा रहे हैं वो टॉपिक्स हैं एनवायरमेंटल पॉल्यूशन, स्ट्रेटोस्फेरिक पॉल्यूशन, वाटर पॉल्यूशन, सॉइल पॉल्यूशन, इंडस्ट्रियल वेस्ट, strategy to control environmental pollution, and green chemistry. Dear students, as you know, the atmosphere that surrounds the earth is not of the same thickness at all heights. There are concentric layers of air or regions, and each layer has different density. The lowest region of atmosphere in which the human beings, along with the other organisms, live is called troposphere. It extends up to the height of 10 km from sea level. Above the troposphere, between 10 and 50 km above sea level, lies stratosphere. The upper stratosphere consists of considerable amount of ozone, that is O3 gas, which protects us from the harmful ultraviolet radiations, that is having wavelength equal to 255 nanometer coming from the sun. These radiations cause skin cancer, that is melanoma, in humans. Therefore, it is important to maintain the ozone shield. Ozone in the stratosphere is a product of ultraviolet radiations acting on dioxygen molecules. The ultraviolet radiations split apart molecular oxygen into free oxygen atoms. These oxygen atoms combine with the molecular oxygen to form ozone. Ozone is a thermodynamically unstable and decomposes to molecular oxygen. Thus, a dynamic equilibrium exists between the production and decomposition of ozone molecules. In recent years, there have been reports of the depletion of this protective ozone layer because of the presence of certain chemicals in the stratosphere. The main reason of ozone layer depletion is believed to be release of the chlorofluorocarbon compounds, that is CFCs, also known as freons. These compounds are non-reactive, non-flammable, non-toxic organic molecules and therefore used in refrigerators or conditioners, in the production of plastic foam, and by the electronic industry for cleaning computer parts, etc. Once CFCs, that is chlorofluorocarbons, are released in the atmosphere, they mix with the normal atmospheric gases and eventually reach the stratosphere. In stratosphere, they get broken down by powerful ultraviolet radiations, releasing chlorine-free radical. The chlorine radical then react with the stratospheric ozone to form chlorine monoxide radicals and molecular oxygen. Reaction of chlorine monoxide radical with the atomic oxygen produces more chlorine radicals. The chlorine radicals are continuously regenerated and cause the breakdown of the ozone. Thus, CFCs are transporting agents for continuously generating chlorine radicals into the stratosphere and damaging the ozone layer. In 1980s, atmospheric scientists working in Antarctica reported about depletion of ozone layer, commonly known as ozone hole, over the South Pole. It was found that a unique set of conditions was responsible for the ozone hole. In summer season, nitrogen dioxide and methane react with chlorine monoxide, reaction 4, and chlorine atoms, reaction 5, forming chlorine sinks, preventing much ozone depletion. Whereas in winter, special type of clouds called polar stratospheric clouds are formed over Antarctica. These polar stratospheric clouds provide surface on which chlorine nitrate formed, reaction 4, gets hydrolyzed to form hydrochlorous acid, reaction 7. It also reacts with hydrogen chloride produced as per reaction 5 to give molecular chlorine. When sunlight returns to the Antarctica in the spring, the sun's warmth breaks up the clouds and hypochlorous acid and chlorine molecules are photolyzed by sunlight as given in reactions 8 and 9. The chlorine radicals thus formed initiate the chain reaction for ozone depletion. टॉपिक इज इफेक्ट्स ऑफ डिप्लीशन ऑफ द ओजोन लेयर। तो जैसा कि आप जानते हैं, जब क्लोरोफ्लोरोकार्बन मॉलिक्यूल्स ट्रोपोस्फियर से स्ट्रेटोस्फियर में एंटर करते हैं तो वो ओजोन मॉलिक्यूल्स को स्ट्रेटोस्फियर में डिस्ट्रॉय कर देते हैं, जिस वजह से क्या हो जाता है कि स्ट्रेटोस्फियर में डिप्लीशन ऑफ ओजोन लेयर हो जाती है और ओजोन होल्स बन जाते हैं। सो विद द depletion of the ozone layer, more ultraviolet radiations filters into troposphere. Ultraviolet radiations lead to aging of skin, cataract, sunburn, skin cancer, killing of many phytoplanktons, damage to fish productivity, etc. It has also been reported that plant proteins get easily affected by ultraviolet radiations, which lead to harmful mutations of cells. It also increases evaporation of surface water through the stomata of the leaves and decreases the moisture content of the soil. Increase in ultraviolet radiation damages plants and fibers, causing them to fade faster. So, the increase in cases of skin cancer is due to the presence of ozone holes. The next topic is water pollution. Water is essential for life. Without water, there would be no life. We usually take water as granted for its purity, but we must ensure the quality of water. Pollution of water originates from human activities. Through different paths, pollution reaches surface or groundwater. Easily identified source or place of pollution is called as point source. For example, municipal and industrial discharge pipes where pollutants enter the water source. Second, non-point sources of pollution are those where a source of pollution cannot be easily identified. For example, agricultural runoff, that is from farm, animals and croplands. Acid rain, storm water drainage, that is from streets, parking lots and lawns. Next is causes of water pollution. The first cause of water pollution is the presence of the pathogens in the water source. The most serious water pollutants are the disease-causing agents called pathogens. Pathogens include bacteria, viruses, parasites, and other organisms that enter water from domestic sewage and animal excreta. Human excreta contain bacteria such as Escherichia coli and Streptococcus faecalis, which cause gastrointestinal diseases. The second cause of water pollution is the presence of organic wastes in the source water. The other major water pollutant is organic matter such as leaves, grass, trash, etc. They pollute water as a consequence of runoff. Excessive phytoplankton growth within water is also a cause of water pollution. These wastes are biodegradable. The next important term is biochemical oxygen demand, which is abbreviated as BOD. As we know, the large population of bacteria decomposes organic matter present in water. They consume oxygen dissolved in water. The amount of oxygen that water can hold in the solution is limited. In cold water, dissolved oxygen can reach a concentration up to 10 parts per million. The concentration of dissolved oxygen in water is very important for aquatic life. If the concentration of dissolved oxygen of water is below 6 parts per million, the growth of fish gets inhibited. Oxygen reaches water either through atmosphere or from the process of photosynthesis carried out by many aquatic green plants during daylight. However, during night, photosynthesis stops. but the plants continue to respire, resulting in reduction of dissolved oxygen. The dissolved oxygen is also used by microorganisms to oxidize organic matter. If too much of organic matter is added to water, all the available oxygen is used up. This causes oxygen dependent aquatic life to die. Thus, anaerobic bacteria, that is, bacteria which do not require oxygen, begin to break down the organic waste and produce chemicals that have a foul smell and are harmful to human health. On the other hand, aerobic bacteria, that is, the bacteria requiring oxygen, such bacteria degrade these organic wastes and keep the water depleted in dissolved oxygen. Thus, the amount of oxygen required by bacteria to break down the organic matter present in certain volume of a sample of water is called biochemical oxygen demand, which is abbreviated as BOD. The amount of biochemical oxygen demand in the water is a measure of the amount of organic material in the water in terms of how much oxygen will be required to break it down biologically. Clean water would have biochemical oxygen demand value of less than 5 parts per million, whereas highly polluted water could have a biochemical oxygen demand value of 17 parts per million or more. The third cause of water pollution is due to the presence of chemical pollutants in source water. As we know that water is an excellent solvent, water-soluble inorganic chemicals that include heavy metals such as cadmium, mercury, nickel, lead, etc. constitute an important class of pollutants. All these metals are dangerous to humans because our body cannot excrete them. Over the time, it crosses the tolerance limit. These metals then can damage kidneys, central nervous system, liver, etc. Acids like sulfuric acid from mine drainage and salts like sodium and calcium chloride from many different sources, including raw salt, used to melt snow and ice in the colder climates, are water-soluble chemical pollutants. The organic chemicals are another group of substances that are found in polluted water. Petroleum products pollute many sources of water. For example, major oil spills in oceans. Other organic substances with serious impacts are the pesticides that drift down from sprays or run off from lands. Various industrial chemicals like polychlorinated biphenyls, abbreviated as PCBs, which are used as cleansing solvent, detergents, and fertilizers, add to the list of water pollutants. Polychlorinated biphenyls are suspected to be carcinogenic. Nowadays, most of the detergents available are biodegradable. However, their use can create other problems. The bacteria responsible for degrading biodegradable detergent feed on it and grow rapidly. While growing, they may use up all the oxygen dissolved in water. The lack of oxygen kills all other forms of aquatic life, such as fish and plants. The next important term is eutrophication. As we know, fertilizers contain phosphates as additives. The addition of phosphates in water enhances algae growth. Such profuse growth of algae covers the water surface and reduces the oxygen concentration in water. This leads to anaerobic conditions, commonly with the accumulation of obnoxious decay and animal death. Thus, bloom-infested water inhibits the growth of other living organisms in the water body. This process, in which the nutrient-enriched water bodies support a dense plant population, which kills animal life by depriving it of oxygen and results in subsequent loss of biodiversity, is known as eutrophication. The next topic is international standards for drinking water. For drinking purposes, water should be tested for fluoride ion concentration. Its deficiency in drinking water is harmful to man and causes diseases such as tooth decay, etc. Soluble fluoride is often added to drinking water to bring its concentration up to 1 part per million. The fluoride ions make the enamel on teeth much harder by converting hydroxyapatite into much harder fluoroapatite. However, fluoride ion concentration above 2 parts per million causes brown mottling of teeth. At the same time, excess fluoride that is over 10 parts per million causes harmful effects to bones and teeth, as reported from some parts of Rajasthan. Next is concentration of lead ions in drinking water. Drinking water gets contaminated with the lead ions when lead pipes are used for transportation of water. The prescribed upper limit concentration of lead ions in drinking water is about 50 parts per billion. Lead can damage kidney, liver, reproductive system, etc. Next is concentration of sulfate ions in drinking water. Excessive sulfate ion concentration, that is above 500 parts per million in the drinking water, causes laxative effect. Otherwise, at moderate levels, it is harmless. Next is concentration of nitrate ions in the drinking water. The maximum limit of nitrate ions in drinking water is 50 parts per million. Excess nitrate ions in the drinking water can cause disease such as methemoglobinemia, that is blue baby syndrome. The maximum concentration of some common metals recommended in drinking water are given here. For example, for iron, it is 0.2 particle per million. For manganese, it is 0.05 particle per million. For aluminum, it is 0.2 particle per million. For copper, it is 3.0 particle per million. For zinc, it is 5.0 particle per million. And for cadmium, it is 0.005 particle per million. The next type of environmental pollution is the soil pollution. Soil is the receptor of large quantities of waste products, that is domestic, human, animal, industrial and agricultural waste products. Combustion of sulfur-containing fuels emits sulfur dioxide gas into the atmosphere and finally leaves sulfate on the soil. Nitrates from the atmosphere are deposited on the soil. Particulate lead from automobile exhausts also settles on soil along both sides of highways with heavy automobile traffic. High levels of lead, zinc, etc. are observed on soils near lead and zinc mines. Fertilizers and pesticides applied to crops are largely retained by the soil. They become part of environmental cycles by absorption by the soil, leaching into water, etc. Pesticides undergo degradation in soil through the processes of biodegradation, chemical degradation, or photochemical reactions. In this respect, insects, earthworms, plants, and microorganisms play important roles. Thus, toluene undergoes hydrolysis in soil. Pesticide residues on crops and food products cause long-term health hazards. Pesticide like DDT was put to use in agriculture to control the damages caused by insects, rodents, weeds, and various crop diseases. However, due to adverse effects, its use has been banned in India. Pesticides are basically synthetic toxic chemicals. The repeated use of the same or similar pesticides give rise to pests that are resistant to that group of pesticides, thus making the pesticides ineffective. Therefore, an insect resistance of DDT increased. Other organic toxins such as aldrin and dieldrin were introduced in the market by pesticide industry. Most of the organic toxins are water insoluble and non biodegradable. These high persistent toxins are therefore transferred from lower trophic level to higher trophic level through food chain. Over the time, the concentration of toxins in higher animals reach a level which causes serious metabolic and physiological disorders. Herbicides such as sodium chlorate, sodium arsenite, and many others are toxic to mammals. Some herbicides cause birth defects. Pesticides and herbicides represent only a very small portion of widespread chemical pollution. A large number of other compounds that are used regularly in chemical and industrial processes for manufacturing activities are finally released in the atmosphere in one or other form. The next topic is industrial solid wastes. Industrial solid wastes are also sorted out as biodegradable and non-degradable wastes. Biodegradable wastes are generated by cotton mills, food processing units, paper mills, and textile factories. Non biodegradable wastes are generated by thermal power plants which produce fly ash, integrated iron and steel plants which produce blast furnace slag and steel melting slag. Industries manufacturing aluminium, zinc, and copper produce mud and tailings. Fertilizer industries produce gypsum. Hazardous waste such as inflammables, composite explosives, or highly reactive substances are produced by industries dealing in metals, chemicals, drugs, pharmaceuticals, dyes, pesticides, rubber goods, etc. The disposal of non degradable industrial solid wastes, if not done by a proper and suitable method, may cause serious threat to the environment. New innovations have led to different uses of waste material. Nowadays, fly ash and slag from the steel industry are utilized by the cement industry. Large quantities of toxic wastes are usually destroyed by controlled incineration, whereas small quantities are burnt along with factory garbage in open bins. Moreover, solid wastes, if not managed effectively, affect the components of the environment. The next topic is strategies to control environmental pollution. For the protection of our immediate environment, we have to undertake some important steps or activities for controlling air, water, soil, and industrial waste pollution in our neighborhood. Let us discuss the solid waste management. Solid waste is not the only waste which we see in our household garbage box. Besides household discards, there are medical, agricultural, industrial, and mining wastes. The improper disposal of waste is one of the major causes of environmental degradation. Therefore, the management of wastes is of utmost importance. We must be aware of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan or Clean India mission launched by the Government of India. Two programs are being implemented under the broad umbrella of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. These are Swachh Bharat Mission Urban and Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin. The Swachh Bharat Mission Urban primarily aims at making urban India free from open defecation and achieving 100% scientific management of solid waste in the country. The Swachh Bharat Mission Gramin targets to bring about an improvement in the general quality of life in rural areas by promoting cleanliness and hygiene and eliminating open defecation. The efforts was made to achieve the goal of universal sanitization coverage by 2nd October 2019, which is the birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. Next is collection and disposal of the solid wastes. Domestic wastes are collected in small bins, which are then transferred to community bins by private or municipal workers. From these community bins, these are collected and carried to the disposable site. At the site, garbage is sorted out and separated into biodegradable and non-biodegradable materials. Non-biodegradable materials such as plastic, glass, metal scraps, etc. are sent for recycling. Biodegradable wastes are deposited in landfills and are converted into compost. The waste, if not collected in garbage bins, finds its way into the sewers. Some of it is eaten by cattle. Non-biodegradable wastes like polythene bags, metal scraps, etc. choke the sewers and cause inconvenience. Polythene bags, if swallowed by animals, can cost their lives also. As a normal practice, therefore, all domestic waste should be properly collected and disposed. The poor management causes health problems leading to epidemics due to contamination of groundwater. It is especially hazardous for those who are in direct contact with the water, such as rag pickers and workers involved in waste disposal, as they are the ones who handle waste materials mostly without protective device such as gloves or waterproof boots and gas masks. The next topic is green chemistry. It is well-known fact that self-sufficiency in food has been achieved in India since late 20th century by using fertilizers and pesticides and exploiting improved methods of farming, good quality seeds, irrigation, etc. But over-exploitation of soil and excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides have resulted in the deterioration of soil, water, and air. The solution of this problem does not lie in stopping the process of development that has been set in, but to discover methods which would help in the reduction of deterioration of the environment. Green chemistry is the study of the design of chemical processes, products, and technologies that reduces or eliminates the use and generation of hazardous substances. There are mainly 12 principles on which the green chemistry is based. The first principle is it is better to prevent waste than to treat or clean up waste after it has been created. The second principle of green chemistry is atom economy. Synthetic methods should be designed to maximize the incorporation of all material used in the process into the final product. The third principle of green chemistry is less hazardous chemical synthesis. Wherever practicable, synthetic methods should be designed to use and generate substances that possess little or no toxicity to people or the environment. The fourth principle of green chemistry is designing safer chemicals. Chemical products should be designed to effect their desired function while minimizing their toxicity. The fifth principle of green chemistry is safer solvents and auxiliaries. The use of auxiliary substances, that is, solvents or separation agents, should be made unnecessary whenever possible and innocuous when used. The sixth principle of green chemistry is design for energy efficiency. Energy requirements of chemical processes should be recognized for their environmental and economic impacts and should be minimized. If possible, synthetic methods should be conducted at ambient temperature and pressure. The seventh principle of the green chemistry is the use of renewable feedstocks. A raw material or feedstock should be renewable rather than depleting whenever technically and economically practicable. The eighth principle of green chemistry is to reduce derivatives. Unnecessary derivatization, for example, use of blocking groups, temporary modification of processes, should be minimized or avoided if possible because such steps require additional reagents and can generate waste. The ninth principle of green chemistry is catalysis. Catalytic reagents, as selective as possible, are superior to stoichiometric reagents. The 10th principle of green chemistry is designed for degradation. Chemical products should be designed so that at the end of their function they break down into innocuous degradation products and do not persist in the environment. The 11th principle of green chemistry is real-time analysis for pollution prevention. Analytical methodologies need to be further developed to allow for real-time in-process monitoring and control prior to the formation of hazardous substances. The 12th principle of green chemistry is inherently safer chemistry for accident prevention. Substances and the form of a substance used in chemical process should be chosen to minimize the potential for chemical accidents, including releases, explosions, and fires. Next topic is green chemistry in day-to-day life. Number 1. Dry cleaning of clothes. Tetrachloroethene was earlier used as solvent for dry cleaning. The compound contaminates the groundwater and is also a suspected carcinogen. The process using this compound is now being replaced by a process where liquefied carbon dioxide with a suitable detergent is used. Replacement of halogenated solvent by liquid carbon dioxide will result in less harm to groundwater. These days, hydrogen peroxide is used for the purpose of bleaching clothes in the process of laundry, which gives better results and makes use of lesser amounts of water. Number 2. Bleaching of paper. Chlorine gas was used earlier for bleaching paper. These days, hydrogen peroxide with suitable catalyst which promotes the bleaching action of hydrogen peroxide is used. Number 3. Synthesis of chemicals. For example, ethanol is now commercially prepared by one-step oxidation of ethene in the presence of ionic catalyst in aqueous medium with a yield of 90%. Number 4. Green solution to clean turbid water. Powder of kernel of tamarind seeds has been found to be an effective material to make municipal and industrial wastewater clean. It is non-toxic, biodegradable and cost-effective material. This powder is usually discarded as agricultural waste. The present practice is to use alum to treat such water. It has been found that alum increases toxic ions in treated water and can cause diseases. Green chemistry, in a nutshell, is a cost-effective approach which involves reduction in material energy consumption and waste generation. Thank you. धन्यवाद.